Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, Zimbabwe enters another lockdown as coronavirus numbers spike. Despite calls for people to avoid large gatherings, worryingly large crowds build up at the border with South Africa. Also, in Central African Republic, opposition candidates say that they are not ready to accept President Archange Touadéra's re-election in last month's vote. Turnout was low because of the ongoing violence from armed groups across the country. And Nollywood's giving Disney a run for its money with its first feature-length animation film. Nigerian producers of Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters say that it's homegrown stories and production that reinforce local culture. Well, Zimbabwe's begun a hard 30-day lockdown. It follows a recent surge in infections and deaths from coronavirus. The country's logged dozens of deaths over 24 hours. Zimbabweans are being urged to avoid large gatherings as there are concerns that many have let their guard down with respect to risks. The country's border post with South Africa has seen throngs of often unmasked people. Ryan Truscott tells us more.
This is a level 4 lockdown, which means most businesses are closed. So are places like schools, restaurants and liquor stores. Supermarkets and pharmacies can only open between 8 and 3. President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who's on leave, took to Twitter to urge Zimbabweans to avoid large gatherings and non-essential travel to stop a second wave of coronavirus. The latest figures say there were 34 deaths and 1,365 cases in the last 24 hours, and that's with limited testing. Tests can cost up to $60 here, more than what was until recently a teacher's monthly salary. Today there were police roadblocks and long traffic queues on major roads leading into Harare. If you couldn't prove you worked for an essential service, state media says you were turned back. People are allowed to go out to buy food or medicine, but only within a 5-kilometre radius, and police are checking this. Despite these efforts to decongest the city, there is major congestion at Zimbabwe's Beitbridge border post with South Africa. Videos shared online show crowds waiting to be cleared, very few wearing masks. Zimbabwe opened its border to travellers on December the 1st after being closed for nearly 9 months. Traditionally, tens of thousands of Zimbabweans who live and work in South Africa return home at Christmas. Then there's always a huge crush at the border in early January as they try to get back. This year, there are fears the congestion could end up being a super spreader event.
Now, South African researchers say that the Covid-19 variant detected in the country is unlikely to be completely resistant to vaccines. There are concerns that available immunisation against the virus might not be able to protect against the 501Y.V2, but experts studying the effects of Covid-19 mutations say that it is still too early to say conclusively that vaccines will not work on the South African variant.
We've been a bit cautious about kind of flagging the concern about the vaccines, is that for many of the vaccines, they are thought to induce quite a broad immune response. So they produce antibodies that will target different parts of the spike protein, not just necessarily one part of the protein. And that's why we think that although these mutations may have some effect, they're very unlikely to completely negate the effect of the vaccines and the different vaccines.
Well, witnesses say that at least 20 wedding guests were killed by helicopter fire in a French airstrike in central Mali over the weekend. Fighter jets were targeting Islamic extremists near the village of Bounty. The armies said that several dozen jihadists were neutralised and that the witness reports do not match their observations. A man wounded in Sunday's strike has said that extremists had approached a group of civilians celebrating a wedding and demanded that men separate from women shortly before the attack. Opposition candidates say that they are not ready to accept the outcome of last month's presidential election that saw President Archange Touadéra re-elected in Central African Republic. His win still has to be confirmed by the country's top court. Turnout was low because of ongoing insecurity across the nation. Clément Di Roma has more.
Despite the provisional count pointing to the re-election of President Touadéra, his party says they'll wait for the final results due on January 19th to make an announcement. The opposition says the election was flawed and undermined by attacks by armed groups. Anissé Georges Dologuélé, who came second with 21% of the vote, does not recognize Touadéra's win and is preparing an appeal to the Constitutional Court.
We will have requests which show that certain figures are false. And we have a general request showing that these elections are not organized under conditions which make them credible and acceptable. So it will be up to the Constitutional Court to take the decisions, depending on the seriousness of the facts, that we will make available to them.
According to the National Election Authority, of 1.8 million registered voters, fewer than 700,000 could cast their ballot. They say that many were destroyed and that several hundred stations closed because of the threat of armed militia. Beyond Bangui, things are still tense. The rebel coalition of Patriots for Change still claims to hold the town of Bangassou since clashes there on Sunday. Its troops continue to advance throughout the country and clash with national forces and allies.
Clément Derome there for us. Now, Ethiopian police have released a cameraman who worked for the Reuters news agency after holding him for 12 days without charge. There was international concern for the well-being of Kumera Gomechu, who was arrested at his home on December 24th. He'd been reporting on the country's conflict between federal troops and local fighters in the Tigray region. The area was under a total communication blackout for 6 weeks as the violence escalated. Officials had claimed that he was suspected of disseminating false information. No evidence, though, was presented. Now, dolls that reflect the children destined to look after them are slowly becoming more available in Ivory Coast. Tired of seeing light-skinned dolls, Sarah Koulibaly began creating dark-skinned alternatives, and the toys are flying off the shelves. Andy Hillier has more.
On the shelves of toy stores across Ivory Coast, dark-skinned dolls are starting to become the norm. A change that's long overdue for these shoppers.
On a été habitué à utiliser des poupées des blancs et maintenant nous voyons que maintenant c'est la peau noire, la forme africaine. Voilà, c'est ce que j'ai aimé, c'est pour ça que je suis venue voir.
Much of this alternative choice is down to Sarah Koulibaly. For 5 years, she's been fighting to offer children something new, free from the representations rooted in the past.
Notre souhait aujourd'hui, c'est de donner aux enfants, donc à la future génération, les armes qui leur permettront de faire les bons choix. Donc à ce moment-là, je ne suis pas en train de décider pour qui que ce soit, mais j'aimerais qu'ils soient conscients du fait que je suis beau, ma culture est belle, mon identité est riche.
For the entrepreneur, it could also be a growing economic opportunity. The growing popularity of black dolls in Ivory Coast has left supply struggling to meet demand.
La revendication d'une identité peut changer le cours d'un marché. On l'a déjà vu. On a vu quand les femmes africaines ont commencé à se plaindre du fait que leur carnation n'existait pas dans la cosmétique, on a vu une totale révolution de ce marché-là. C'est la même chose que je souhaite faire dans un domaine autre, mais avec les mêmes arguments.
For now, producing these dolls depends on importing materials from abroad. Sarah Koulibaly is hoping that soon they'll be made entirely from homegrown materials.
Now, Nollywood is giving Disney a run for its money. Nigeria's first feature-length animation film has just come out. It's called Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters. Producers are prioritising local storytelling across as many mediums as they can. Nicolas Chemin has more.
These Nigerians have come to the cinema to see the country's first feature-length animation film. It's called Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters. It's the story of a young girl who travels through time. The film's producers face many financial constraints. They first thought they would have to make it abroad, but in the end, everything was done in Nigeria.
We tend to be risk averse, but I believe that this production is a source of inspiration to a lot of Nigerians. They are learning that, we can actually do this, and I think that there will be a lot of experimentation, in animation.
Many actors from Nollywood, Africa's largest film industry, voice the characters.
To our sustenance, the sustenance of our culture, of who we are as Africans. Bringing something like this to light has given us the opportunity to get our children to hear our stories and carry it on, preserve culture.
The film had a cast and crew of 30 people and a budget of over $1 million. Its producers hope to release a sequel in the coming months.
Looks amazing. I'm going to have to make some time to see that. Well, that is, though, what we're going to have to leave it now for Eye on Africa. But we will be leaving you with the chilly beauty of particularly heavy snowfall across the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. Do join us again if you can. Take care.